So, two of my roommates are really into the Hoyoverse games. So like Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact, that kind of thing. And they were showing us an animated short from the, I don't know, I think it was a trailer. It might have been like a cutscene or something. But they were showing us this trailer. They were hyping it up to be really well animated. And I agree that it's pretty well animated. But I just couldn't help while I was watching it think about things in modern 2D animation that really bother me in a few specific productions. Like, I couldn't really get behind the short. Sure, the shirtless, like, fireman was cool and all that, but I just kept feeling that all these, like, direction choices in the short were screaming at me. Like, there are certain things in there that just drive me personally insane. Then that got me to think about how I personally like to describe and talk about fights in tabletop games, how I like to run them. Tabletop games and the imagination of the players is largely dictated by the DM. As a DM, you are both the room that the players are standing in and also the camera at which they peek into this world. So you need to direct their eye a little bit. You need to tell them what's in the room. Otherwise, it feels like the camera is blurry or the camera's faced the wrong way. I want to pick out a few animated and non-animated scenes and then pick out things that I do and don't like about these to then inform how I like to render out fight scenes for Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop games in general. The location at which a fight happens is important and should be handled with a lot of care and should be handled in a way where it is extremely clear to the players at all times. First things first, I want to clarify that when I'm talking about, like animation, I understand that animation is hard. It's very time consuming and there are budget constraints. I went to art school, I know people who did that. So when I'm talking about animation, I mostly think that a lot of the problems that I'm going to be pointing out is like a production thing and not a lack of talent, skill, or like organizational abilities. Like these artists are all very capable of doing so much, but it's really just, modern day problems. Secondly, when I'm talking about these animations, I am not saying that these are bad animations or they look bad or anything like that. I think that they actually look really good. What I'm pointing out is the way that these animations convey information to the viewer. Are they conveying like the story very well? Are they conveying like, where they are spatially very well? That's more of my point here. Storytelling matters a lot to me, so I think that a fight should really be progressing the storytelling as much as possible and should be able to convey a lot of information. I think that fights should be 100% more than just aura farming. Thirdly, I don't watch too many like animations or anything, or I don't watch a lot of TV shows in general now. I do see just a lot of clips on Twitter or like online or like the occasional time that I do watch things. So, there probably are good and bad examples of everything I'm talking about here. So feel free, if you have other examples that bother you or don't bother you, feel free to discuss that. I would love to hear about that. Okay, let's get into what I don't like about modern animation. I think there's a big reliance on special effects, really good sound design, and then just adding in as much visual clutter as possible to kind of cover up for a lack of spatial awareness and lack of like actual fight choreography. Like, yes, it's good, it's flashy, it gets your attention. You could probably make a good gif out of it, of your like hot shirtless man, but that's kind of it. Okay, let's look at the fight scene again. I want you to imagine that you are a cameraman recording this fight in front of you. Where are you? Where are you spatially in regards to the character that's in front of you? And then where is he in regards to everything else in the scene? It's impossible to tell. It's just a bunch of constant close-up shots of strings of attacks that don't feel like they're connected. And then any wider shot just feels like it's blurred or has like a lot of like motion blur on it. The location of the fight at that point feels like it's become so arbitrary that it could be fought anywhere. You could drop this in a Walmart parking lot and it would have the same amount of importance, at least to me, like from an outside viewer, because all the movements, everything that's the camera showing me shows me nothing about what's going on around him. And look, I love One Piece. I think that the animation of the recent like episodes, ever since they got to Wano and things like that, it's been fun, it's flashy and everything like that. But if you actually watch any of those scenes, they are just near incomprehensible. Like, looking at any of their fight scenes, it's impossible to tell where people are, like, spatially, because they either go in the air and they're throwing each other around, or they're whipping each other across mountains so wide, like, it feels like it doesn't matter. There's, like, zero impact to it. Like, there's no sense of location or background. It feels like it could be done anywhere. And despite me loving that show, just, again, it feels like these fights, I mean, to be fair, One Piece fights have never been, like, great. But still, it feels so just, you know, blah to me. Okay, I'm gonna switch it up a little bit and I'll go to 3D animation. Because 3D animation has similar problems. It's a little bit different. So I showed this Sonic scene before, talking about how movement is really cool, and I remember thinking this fight looks so cool, and it is very visually cool, and I was like pissing my pants in the theater, you know? But if you really think about it for a moment, like, this, again, the same fight could just be happening in parking lots. They are throwing each other from empty field to empty field, and the impact of their hits doesn't really matter once you start scaling up characters that much. Like, they are tossing each other across the world, and it just kind of, again, it feels like none of their hits actually have any impact. They're not getting hurt with this, for sure. Now I need you to imagine any of these fight scenes as like a D&D game, or you're at a table, and this is being described to you. Okay, Brandholt, you're first on initiative. What do you do? So I take my Warhammer and DM, where exactly are we fighting again? Just like a place. Okay, wait, where am I exactly in relation to all the other enemies? Somewhere. Okay, where's the Lich? Yeah, he's definitely somewhere around there. Do you see how narratively unsatisfying that is to be playing in? Sure, your players could maybe do a cool combo string, throw a fireball, do a lot of numbers, but those are all just things that are very flashy. Again, ore farming only gets you so far. If you really think about it, that fight or encounter is going to feel really kind of empty, like they are fighting in a very untangible world. They might as well be fighting in Squidward's Void. Okay, let's very quickly go over a few fight scenes across several other mediums to kind of get my point across of what I think a good example of this is. In the very first episode of Soul Eater, although it's a very, very short fight, I'm pretty sure this is like at the start of Soul Eater as well, the fight is just so well choreographed, and you can tell everything that's going on, and they deliver a lot of information to you because a fight is an element of a story, and they're doing a really good job at that. You immediately know that you're coming into a fight that's next to a staircase. There is like a city street, and there are buildings kind of like lining the sides of the characters. They show you plenty of shots of the fight before it happens, like so you have shots of the area, they show you close-up shots, a few wide shots during the fight where they are showing you actually where they are moving in the space, just so that you actually know where these characters are going. And then because the staircase was added into that scene, the staircase ends up being a part or like an element of the fight that the characters use during their fight against Jack. The direction of the fight is so clear, you could actually draw a play-by-play of them moving on this street just from the animated camera work. You wouldn't be able to do that with some of the other things that I showed you. And then the use of the environment is really strong here. Again, they're using the staircase as part of the fight, and they, you know, showed that. Parts of the buildings that were shown in some of the establishing shots are being, you know, destroyed in the middle of the fight. And then it kind of, you can tell which building got hit. Even though, you know, they're animating it and kind of moving the camera across, it just doesn't really feel like anything was placed arbitrarily, and that feels good in a storytelling sense. Now imagine this described in a tabletop setting. Moonlight scatters across the city. As you continue down on the cobblestone path, you are flanked to your left and right by buildings made of orange bricks. A few windows inside still flicker with candlelight as some folk are still awake. Several awnings and pillars line the buildings next to you. In front of you, there are two sets of staircases running down to a further street. At the bottom of the staircase is the creature that you've been hunting. It turns and regards itself to you. As you draw your weapons, it begins to chase you up the stairs. Roll initiative. Now imagine your players are playing here, and you can describe the pillar at which it gets destroyed. There is a staircase that your pillars would probably want to kick down an enemy down the stairs. That happens. They, you know, when you put like a ledge in front of someone in a game, people like to, you know, kick people over. There are these awnings that could be used in the fight if you wanted to. There's these pillars, there's the bricks, you know, there are windows that, you know, you could call for civilians. There are all these elements in this fight now that your players are going to be inclined to use. It's not just going to be, you know, sword attack, action surge, sword attack, you know? There are options. And of course, if that's what they want to do, sure. But if there are players in your group that are more creative, give them the tools to do so. Like, you can't have that classic scene of someone swinging in on like a chandelier or something without having first, you know, given them the chandelier to play with. I think there are plenty of other fights where things are very done spatially, and some of them are modern, some of them are not. But I'll just go over things from like clips that I've seen, and I'll very briefly show them on screen because I don't want to, show a clip for too long. I think that the fights in Chainsaw Man are pretty good. I saw a few of them. They have a really good, way of space. Like you're in an apartment building or you're on the street, and it feels like you have an idea of where they're running or where they're moving. The classic Naruto fights, the ones that everyone memes on because, the characters go off model so often, but those fights were great because they were just like fully animated, choreographed fights. Like you could really imagine two people, fighting on that water. And then, like Cowboy Bebop, a lot of like old classic animes, just because probably, budget restrictions were different, had a really good time animating. And I think those ones work, and they're pretty clear because they're pretty, obviously like low fantasy for the most part. They're fighting with their hands, or they're doing things that are not so dramatic that you can't like imagine that affecting the area around them. But if you do really have to go and like think magic to think about like how you can scale that for a fight and how to make that feel like there's an impact. I watched some clips from Free Ren. I think that's how you say it. And the fights there, even though, there's things exploding, they're floating around like, this old architecture, like castles, things like that. You can get a really good sense and draw out where these characters are moving spatially. And I think that's really important in kind of selling the narrative of a fight. And then in terms of making a fight feel important, or like the location of a fight feel important, I think a show that does it well is Invincible. I know that a lot of people rag on the animation of it, and yeah, a lot of the animation is like, PNG based, but at least a lot of their big fights that they pour all their budget into, you really do see that they're where they fight doesn't feel arbitrary. A lot of the times where they fight has consequences. So they're fighting near cities. A lot of people are, getting blown away, and that's addressed in the story of the show. Main character has to deal with that, or like parts of the environment are being used for the fight. AKA the train scene from Invincible. Again, like those lives, everything they don't feel arbitrary. They're part of the background, but they are being used. And it's also very clear where they are most of the time. Sometimes they go into the air, and that's when their fights are the weakest, because it's impossible to tell how fast people are moving when you show them just a blue background and it's like just the sky. So they do a pretty good job of always fighting near the ground. Every time you see a punch, like windows crash nearby. And that's something that kind of, sells a narrative. Okay, and then a little bit out of the topic of like animation and stuff in general, I think if you are making a fight scene, it's really good to reference like live action movies. Just think of any martial arts movies that you have ever seen. They are some of the most creative fight scenes you've ever seen, and they make so much use of their environment. Like in old comedy martial arts movies, people will use anything that's around them. If they're in a grocery store, they are throwing bags of chips, they are throwing bottles, they're climbing over, like the little rows and sections. If, they're in like a warehouse, they're climbing over things, they're dropping materials. It's funny, it's comedy, but they're using all these materials like on hand for advantage in the fight. They're throwing ladders at people, they're climbing ladders, they're dropping ladders, doing all of those kinds of things, and it's just fun. And it feels like, again, you wouldn't be able to do that without someone having done the work to like design that set or design that world. As a DM, when you put up a fight together, you were designing a set for these characters to be using. And of course, it's not a movie, they don't have to use everything, but if it's not there, or like if it's never been described, then your players aren't going to be doing anything that's cool other than doing whatever is on their character sheet. And what's on the character sheet isn't always the most fun thing. And if you don't, follow like old martial arts movies, thinks like John Wick or like the Kingsman, they are always using whatever's in the room itself. The Kingsman, throwing the cup, or John Wick, killing people with every possible item you can find around. That's only possible because those things are in the scene to begin with. Okay, just somewhat what I consider like a pretty good fight, especially in terms of a tabletop setting, is if I could accurately draw out a play-by-play of what's going on. So if you're doing theater of the mind, you gotta have a little bit more finesse with it. You gotta really describe where the characters are moving. If you have a battle map, it's helped a little bit, but of course, we don't want to play on a blank battle map. Add some objects, add minis, add stuff into the scene, draw out stuff on your battle map. You don't have to spend money on anything else other than a marker. But essentially, you just need to start placing things in the scenes that your players can interact with. And that can be with just words or by literally placing them on a battle map, things like that. But describing things that are around so that your players have toys to play with. You are giving them a glimpse into your imagination. I would hope that your imagination is a little bit more than just, blank room. Because if I was a player, I have very little interest in playing in like an open field that feels like it doesn't matter. I want to play like on a cliff where I can probably push someone over, or I want to fight someone next to a lava pit and like one of us might get burned. If we're in a city, I want to fight maybe on top of like food vendor carts, say a cabbage cart. I want to know what if there's a wall next to me, what's the wall made of? Will it hurt if someone gets their face smushed into it? D&D is not a visual medium, so it's your job as the DM to kind of shine the light on everything that's around, especially during a fight, because those are tools that your players can do to make cool scenes. If you tell them there's a bridge, how does it suspend itself? Is it like a rope suspension bridge? If it's a rope suspension bridge, then someone could, say, cut the rope. If there is a like rooftop fight and a few of the shingles are falling down, that can be part of the element of the fight. Maybe you can have someone fall over by stepping on like a loose tile. Or again, if you're doing like a chase scene or something, what's on the street that your players can knock over to try to extend their run? Again, cabbage cart. And then on top of that, I would also say just make the direction in which players move not feel arbitrary. So if they are running from something, which direction are they running? If they are fighting a character, are they slowly pushing towards their goal instead of just fighting a character in an arbitrary space? Make it feel like it matters. These are just a few things that you would really want to flesh out in a fight to kind of make it feel more unique. Just think like any video game, right? Baldur's Gate 3, there's always something in an environment that you can interact with during a fight. There's turrets on the walls, or there's a splash of water that you can electrify, things like that. Just adding elements that can be played with in some way is important. You don't have to highlight that this water can be electrocuted, but your players might have natural curiosity. If I cast like lightning bolt or shocking grasp here, will it affect someone else who's standing in the water? And that's something that there aren't many rules as written on that, but as a DM, just let your players give your players tools to do cool things. Okay, I ranted long enough. Again, none of those animations are bad. I just think that the backgrounds feel like they don't matter, and I like it when backgrounds matter, because the backgrounds are where characters can really do cool stuff. I really care a lot less about just two characters fighting in an open field when I could be seeing someone throw dirt at each other, Okay. Thank you for watching.